Welcome to More Than a Few Words, a marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And I love podcasts. I love my podcast. I love being on podcasts. And I think you should love podcasts too. And if you're thinking that you would be a great podcast guest, well, I have the perfect conversation for you. Today, Angel Tuccy is sitting in my guest chair, and Angel is an award-winning media specialist. She's a 15-time best-selling author, and she runs a network community for podcasters at needaguest.com. Angel, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Lorraine, I am so excited to be here today to talk about how being a podcast guest is one of the best marketing tools you have for your business.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And I'm going to put the plug in now and I'll say it again later. I have made so many amazing connections and found great guests at needaguest.com. I'm not just saying that. That is a place I hang out, and I think people should do that. So step number one, if you're thinking about being a podcast guest, head over there. Now, once you're there, Angel, what do I do? How do I get noticed? How do I become a guest?
Oh my gosh, I love this question, Lorraine, and I love your show. You are a fan favorite among all of our clients. They love you. I love you. Thank you so much for this opportunity today. But I will tell you what, being a podcast guest, being a podcast host, an incredible opportunity to build your brand, to bring people into your world and build those great relationships. But being a podcast guest, if you are not quite ready yet to be a host, or you are a host and you're looking for more visibility and exposure, my number one tip is build relationships with podcast hosts. They're talking to your audience every day, and your guests are talking to the same audience every day. And speaking of talking to the same audience every day, promote the shows that you are a guest on. How's that for like an aha moment? There's so much opportunity to share your visibility and share these interviews that I think a lot of podcast hosts are just missing the boat on.
Absolutely. I love when I hop on LinkedIn and I have a notification and it says you've been mentioned in a post, and I realize it's one of my guests who's using the little video short I gave them or the little graphic and saying, hey, I was just a guest and this is what we talked about, because it has so much more credibility. But it's good for them too, because now they're perceived as an expert.
You betcha. You betcha. And here's the thing, like, you have so many opportunities as a guest to promote yourself and that show and to help drive traffic to that show, where of course somebody's going to listen. It's the best way to connect deeply with your audience, especially if they're listening to it in an audio form. Like, your voice connects the most deeply with an audience. And so when you first get booked, you can share that on LinkedIn. But once that show drops, you have so many opportunities to promote that show and promote that host. It's not just a one-time thing. Mm-hmm. I like to make a link, a Google sheet of all of my podcast opportunities with the recording links, so I can go and share them later, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road. Mm-hmm. And always, like, be friends with the host, tag them in your posts, send emails out. I'm going to send an email out once this show drops to my entire database to say, hey, go and listen to this episode that I got to be featured on, and just repurpose the content. It's free marketing exposure for you at this point. You've already done the interview. It would be a shame to keep that interview a secret, but build relationships and remember to share your podcast interviews with your audience.
Absolutely. I love that spreadsheet because I have one as well. And obviously I've been doing this a long time, so I go back quite a ways. And one of my favorite tricks is I love to look for 2 or 3 shows where I talked about a similar topic, but not the same interview over and over, and do a LinkedIn article or a blog post that really features me in the guest chair, me talking about this topic, and really reinforces for people, hey, I know something about this.
You do, right? And you do, and you can create a bundle. Here's the thing is podcast listeners like to listen to podcasts. So if they've listened to one, of course they're going to want to binge and listen to others. So yeah, if you've got the audios, you can record audios or videos, audios, and print, right? Blogs, articles, it's always an easier opportunity. And when you've got every conversation, even if the topic is similar or the same, every conversation is unique and different because of the conversation you're having with the host, which is one of my reasons why I love being a podcast guest. It's not the same stale presentation that I give over and over again. We're actually having a fun dialogue.
Yeah, and especially if the host asks you a left field question, something nobody else has asked. Like, for example, what'd you have for breakfast today?
Right? You're like, wait a minute, I was not expecting to have to answer that I did not have breakfast today. Now I have to tell everybody that I'm running on fumes, but I did have lunch.
Okay, well, good.
Leftovers.
I love leftovers. But that's the whole point, is that it's those little detours that happen in the conversation that you have to be prepared for, that let a little bit of your humanity come through, that I just love about podcasting.
I think so too. Like it's a fresh and raw dialogue. It's not scripted. It's in the moment, and you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid of being perfect. In fact, we don't want perfect. It's okay if you stumble. Lorraine said maybe her cat might scroll through the scene a little bit. Like it's okay for life to be happening.
Mhm.
The people are listening because they want to be inspired. They want to learn from somebody who's going to give them hope, maybe an extra education, a little leg up from something that they're already doing, but they're not expecting perfection. And that's where those random questions from left field, but also at the same time, as a guest, it's okay. It's okay if there are a couple of left field questions, but recognize that you guys are both here, the host and as a guest,
Mhm.
to do one thing, and that is to add value to the audience. Right? If we can add value to the audience, right, they'll come for the content, but they stay for the people, right? They come
Mhm.
for the show more than a few words because of the content, but they stay for the host because they love Lorraine. And then they'll follow the guest because they fell in love with you too. So make sure, number one, that everything is just always adding value to the audience, because that's who we're here to serve.
Absolutely. So, if I want to be on more podcasts and I want to increase my booking acceptance rate, because I'm stalking a bunch of podcasts, I'm getting to know some podcast hosts, I'm following their shows. Now I want them to notice me. What can I do to increase the number of shows that I do get booked on?
Oh, I love that question. We actually have in-house a 60% booking rate, which means for every 3 shows we reach out to, we get booked on 2. And the reason for that is, and it's probably going to seem counterintuitive, but I really want you to apply to less shows. I want you to reach out to less podcast hosts, because what I'm really looking for is quality over quantity. If you can build relationships with hosts and add value, so hang out where they hang out, listen to their shows, share their shows with others, build a connection, network with hosts who are actually looking for guests for their shows.
Mhm.
You're going to get far more reach out of that pitch and that outreach than if you send out 1,000 cold emails. Right? 1,000 cold emails to podcast hosts you don't know, have never heard of you, you don't even know if they're looking for guests, is not going to get you booked. You're
Mhm.
far better networking with 100 of really good quality podcast hosts in a community where you know they are looking for guests, which is what we've created, I think, in our Need a Guest network.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, um, I won't tell you who it was, but I had somebody that I actually had seen on another podcast um, site, and I applied to be on his show, and he ignored me. Because
Darn him.
there were so many people applying. But when I got on to Need a Guest and we started talking, and I saw that he was there, and I engaged with him, I wasn't sucking up. He said something funny. I commented, and we built this rapport. It was the most natural thing in the world to then say, "Hey, I would like to be on your show. And would you like to be on mine?" And sure enough, that has happened. We've recorded both sessions, and I'm fangirling a little bit because it was someone I really wanted to be with.
Right. And I love, so what we do, Lorraine, is we're always out attracting and building relationships with podcast hosts and bringing them into the network. And I think that because they've been invited by a human, that they
Mm-hmm.
are more likely to say, oh my gosh, yes, in this world and in this community. And so we have a lot of our hosts that once they realize that the guest is from our network, they're like, of course I'll have them on your show. We're old school. We have built this network and this community by building relationships, shaking hands, having Zoom calls, but it's more effective. And so do
Mm-hmm.
less, but go deeper, right? Rather than
Awesome.
just staying up here and cold email, cold email, cold email, go a little bit deeper and build relationships and actually connect with the people you want to be a guest on their show.
Fantastic, fantastic advice. Angel, I am so glad that you dropped by. I love following your content and updates where I see you, and it's so nice to have you in my guest chair.
I loved being here, right? And I love talking about podcasting. I love that you're in my community, and I'm so excited you got to be a guest on a show that you were looking forward to.
I did. Thank you again.
Thanks, Lorraine.
And I'm going to remind you guys, if you are thinking about being a podcast guest, hop over to needaguest.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. It's something you want to check out. And if you're looking for other resources for your business, hop over to morethanafewwords.com. You'll find hundreds of conversations just like this one, workbooks, webinars, and so much more. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.